Hey everyone, this is Kenny with Flytime RC. I'm just doing a new build video here. This is a time lapse of a Bronco that I built. This is a Bronco 2. So this is basically made out of dollar store foam board and a bunch of glue, using hot glue and a little bit of packing tape to kind of strengthen it up. But I'm going to kind of go over this kind of homemade build and tell you guys a little bit about it as I go. So I'm using a full sheet of foam board here and basically just cutting in grooves in the foam board so that it will bend properly so I can get the airfoil shape that I'm looking for. And right here I'm cutting out the spars that go in the wings. Um, so I measured out about an inch from where the foam board is going to crease back and then glue my spars in that area, so an inch back. And then as you can see right there, it's about an inch from where I'm actually going to bend the wing. So definitely use a good amount of hot glue to glue it in there and try to flatten it out and hold it flat so that the wing, when it's dry, once it's all cooled off, it stays nice and flat. So right here, I'm bending the airfoil. So this wing, I decided to do something a little bit different. It has kind of a longer wing, and we'll go over how that performed in another video. I have several flight videos, but so this was kind of a new design for me. It's a little different than the first Bronco that I made, which I do not have a build video on, but I do have some flying videos on there, and maybe I'll do another video in the future of talking about that and how I built it. Um, but I've already moved the electronics from Bronco 1, which was my original design, to this one, which is the Bronco 2. So basically here, I'm extending the wing. So this thing has a really big wing. I think the wing was a little over a foot wide, or a foot deep, and then it's 30 inches wide, which is the same width as the foam board. It's just a new idea. Just trying to see how the wider wing did, if it gave it more stability. The first Bronco, if you watched some of my first videos that I put on the channel, it actually flew really good. It was really stable and it did awesome. And I was kind of hoping that with a larger wing, maybe it would be even better. It would just be kind of a slow, kind of a chill flyer. Um, but it did work out okay. But this video, I really tried during this build to do my best on it, as far as like make sure everything was square, make sure I cut out everything as good as possible. I tried to measure everything and make it as perfect as I could. My Bronco 1, my first build, I kind of just threw it together just out of nowhere, and I didn't really try too hard to get it perfect. I just kind of eyeballed everything. And this one, I really wanted to try to do a better job. Here, so I'm cutting out the part of the fuselage that's going to hold the rear wing. And this one, I believe, the rear stabilizer is 4 inches wide it's 4 inches wide by 10 inches, or it was 11 inches, and so that's what this is supporting. So here I put a little bit of glue in between them, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue around all the edges too, the front and the back edges, just to give it a little strength. But also, I got a really cheap glue gun, and it gets pretty hot, but I have a hard time putting a lot of glue down over a big area before it starts to cool off on the other end of the area, so that the bonding isn't that great. So what I did here is put a few drops of glue in each corner basically, and then I went around all of the edges to kind of glue the seam together, and then I flattened it out with this a scrap piece of foam board. But here I measured everything out to make it square and make sure that these were sitting on square to the wing, and just applied a good amount of glue to the bottom side. And then I'll go ahead and glue the outside edges too, and then scrape away any excess, just to kind of keep the weight down, but also make sure it's nice and strong. cutting off any excess on there. I do have another Bronco in the works, a Bronco 3, and I think maybe after I've kind of perfected this design, I will do another final build video with some measurements and other things like that so you guys can build your own if you're interested. This particular build was pretty fun, and I just kind of threw it together. I think total it took about 3 hours or so, 3.5 hours, and I had already built a Bronco 1, so I kind of had an idea of what I was going to do, but this one was a little bit different. I basically changed quite a few things on it, but it still looks fairly similar. Here I'm building the rear stabilizer with the elevator on there. The elevator is, I think it was about 9 inches wide by an inch deep. Um, and that was a similar size to the Bronco 1 that I had built, and that had seemed to give me plenty of elevator authority. So as I was saying, this one was kind of just thrown together. Like I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I was sort of making it up as I went because I know I wanted to make some changes to like the look of the plane and maybe hopefully make it better. So I kind of just made it up as I went. Here, the fuselage is considerably smaller than Bronco 1 that I built. I was really trying to get the weight down on this one because after I had completely finished Bronco 1, it turned out to be a little heavy. I think it was about 19 ounces. And before I had finished it and added some strength to it and a little tape and like the red tape to get the color on it, it added about an ounce and a half to 2 ounces, and I could really feel the difference in the weight after I did that. Like when it was around 1 pound, it did fine, and it flew fine. It wasn't fast or anything, but it was nice and stable and predictable, and it did roll really well. So a lot of the goal with this one, even though I made the wing bigger, I was trying to save weight in other areas so that I could stick to around that 1 pound total weight. And I believe this one was with the 2 cell battery about 17 ounces. So I did drop an ounce total weight, which was kind of cool because I had a bigger airfoil. So here I'm just squaring up everything on the fuselage. I really tried to make this as perfect as I could. Well, I guess as perfect as you can get with using foam board. Try to measure everything out and make sure everything was square and made sure the fuselage was totally centered as good as I possibly could. Lots of glue on this one. I can't remember. I think it was somewhere like maybe 20 sticks of glue or something, which is quite a bit. Probably could have used less, but I'm still relatively new to flying, and I probably crashed my plane on not on every flight, but maybe every 3 flights. And also with building these kind of homemade planes, they're all just an experiment to see whether they fly or not, and then add learning to fly on top of it. So my chances of crashing are fairly high. So thinking about that during this build and others, trying to make it as strong as possible because there's a fair chance it's going down, especially if I did a really bad design. This original design is based off a video that I seen. The YouTuber, his name is Tim. He built a similar looking Bronco, um, and his flew amazing. He used a different engine and prop and a little bit different looking plane. He had a different rear stabilizer, um, but uh, overall the plane is fairly similar, and so I kind of based my idea off of his and kind of expanded on it and kind of changed things up and made it my own. And this Bronco, especially Bronco 2, is considerably different, um, which in some ways is good, in some ways not so good. So here I am. I guess I didn't get it in video very well, but I'm cutting out the engine mount and drilling the holes to mount the motor. Um, which now that I'm done with it, I'll have to try to get that on camera better next time. Basically, just drilling a couple holes in the 1/8 inch plywood. Also, something else that I got from the dollar store. I think This build, not including electronics, of course, the plane itself cost about $4 to build, which is pretty awesome because when I crash it, I don't feel too bad about it as far as the money. I mean, obviously, I had hours of time plus a lot of thought into how I was going to build it. So that's a bummer, but that's part of the fun, really. I super enjoy just building these, even if the plane doesn't fly very good. It's still a blast to build. So I got the motor mounted here, and I'll be beefing up the fuselage and kind of setting up right here. I was setting up the battery tray, and I kind of want the battery to sit pretty solid in there. And with this one, I had to make room for a 2 cell and a 3 cell, and the 3 cell is twice as big. It's really heavy, and it's longer by like 2 inches, and it's thicker by about a half an inch, so it's considerably bigger. So when I was designing the battery tray, I had to kind of take that into account to make sure I could fit both of them and also get a decent CG. So while I'm setting this up, I was wanted to make sure that my motor was rotating in the right direction. Um, Here I'm making mounting plates to put the ESC and the receiver, and that this also stiffens up the fuselage in case of a crash. Something I did on this one that I didn't think about on the first one is actually facing the receiver up to where I can see where all the plugs are, all the numbers, and I can easily plug them in and unplug them from the top. When I built the first Bronco, I had it running sideways, and so I wasn't really thinking about it, but it really made it a pain to get things plugged in and unplug them. And on this one, I think I set up flaperons, so being able to like see where everything plugged in and made sure that I had the servos plugged into the right spaces really helped because I ended up having to switch them around. So just having that receiver orientation the way it was just helped a lot, and I'm just going to do that on every build from now on. It just makes a big difference on getting things plugged in. So I got the ailerons cut out. These I believe were 8 inches wide by 1 inch, and on the first Bronco I had plenty of aileron authority, no problem turning. They're not super responsive, but that's fine, like for what this plane is. I think they had a good response. You can see some of the rolls that I do and the turns in the first videos with the Bronco 1, and see that the aileron authority is just fine. So I decided to do the same thing on these. They have about 45-degree cut on the front edge, and then on the plane has the same cut as well. So that way when you go up with the ailerons, they don't bind up at all. And then what I do is I tape them on from the bottom with the packing tape. That way they're super strong, and they they do their job. I think they deflect about a half an inch. They move a good amount. Um, and I'm kind of gonna stick with that, at least for the Bronco design, just because the performance has been good. And any others that I build in the future, I'll probably do the same thing because it's plenty deflection. They move just enough, and it steers nice. So here I'm setting up the flaperons, trying to figure out where exactly I'm going to mount these servos. Again, this is like totally made up as I went, so I was kind of figuring it out as I go. Do one side and then copy it directly on the other. Um, this one, I think I cut out I cut out a little tiny spot here for the wire that comes out of the servo. That way it didn't get pinched and bound up. Because the servo does fit about halfway down the wing, so that wire can get kind of pushed up a little bit. So I was thinking about that during this construction, so I can make sure that it didn't get bound up. So the other side, basically just copy it, make sure I triple measure everything to try to get it as perfect as I can. So make sure both ailerons are set up exactly the same. I did have to make new connecting rods for these. Um, so I had to modify them a couple times to make sure I got it as close as I possibly could. these so the connecting rods for the servos also came from flight tests. So the motor and ESC, the servos, they all came from flight test, which is awesome. They put out good stuff, and like I can't really argue with the price. Like they just throw together a whole kit, and it's relatively cheap. So I got the kit that was made for. Oh, I'm gonna have to look it up really quick. I can't remember offhand. It's for the Millennium Falcon, I think. Let's look. It was the way I decided to kind of pick the motor for this was based on weight, and then also cost because I was trying to keep the cost down as much as I could on this build because like I got $4 into the plane and I didn't want to spend a bunch on electronics. I just wanted it to fly because like I said, this is kind of just for fun and I'm still learning, so I'm not pouring a bunch of money into it. And that was another reason I went with flight test because they have power pack kits and it makes it so easy to just get everything at once. Okay, so this was for the Millennium Flurkin that they sell on their website. So this power pack kit I think was like $45, and then I had it comes with 9 gram servos, and then the rear servo, which I'm going to change, is I believe a 5 gram servo, and I had it from another power pack kit, so I just grabbed it and decided to use it for the elevator. It has worked out fine for the elevator. I have since come up with a slightly different design for the connecting rod for the elevator because it did bend quite a bit, even being only I think it's like 5 inches, 6 inches away. It still had quite a bit of bend in the rod, which is sort of a bummer because when you do up elevator, the the plane is so heavy, even though it's only 1 pound, it tends to bend the rod. So I think looking back now, that had something to do with the not so responsive elevator, especially when you're coming down with some speed and you try to flare up for a landing or something. The elevator does work good, but it could work better. So that servo is a little light for this, and same with the connecting rod. So I'm setting up the flaperons here, which is something I didn't do with Bronco 1. I just wanted to try it, just mostly for landing purposes, to see if I could slow it down a little bit, but also see if I could do some slower flying with it, and just for fun, because flaperons are free. If you have the ability in your controller to set it up, why not? Just for fun. So I'm finishing up. I basically got all the electronics done here, um, and the control horns for all the surfaces. I got everything basically done. I'm just finishing up the fuselage here. I made a lid, um, which opens lengthways, and I have a couple tiny neodymium magnets. They're like about a 1/4 inch around, and then I've just found two tiny little screws, little metal screws that I can use to glue into the fuselage up front to use to hold the door down. And this just made it really easy, um, opening and shutting it. That way it's just easy to get in and out of. And then I put a little handle on it with tape, which is makes it just easier to open. So I'm marking here where the screws are going to go so that I can get the door set up. So the motor mount, also, it is about 2 degrees to the right and about 2 degrees down. And just from research, I've seen that that's what a lot of people are doing with their homemade planes as far as the motor setup to kind of counteract the rotation of the propeller, and that seemed to be working out okay so far for that. So on the bottom of this, a lot for landing, but adding a little bit of strength too, is just running tape lengthways along the wing, and that's gonna help a lot to protect from like when you land on the ground, especially in like grass or gravel. It just kind of skips off the ground instead of tearing the foam apart, which is super helpful. So that was like a major thing. I think in any foam builds that I do in the future, I'll do this on all of them regardless. The top, not so important, but the bottom, absolutely. And then the front of the airfoil as well. Putting a couple layers of tape on that just helps so much. Just learning really quick off of Bronco 1, like if I hit anything or if I go into like some bushes or something, having the front of that protected with a layer or two of tape, it just adds so much strength to it because the foam with the paper is really it's not that strong and it'll get shredded pretty easily. Even just landing in some gravel, it gets shredded up. But with the tape, it's not invincible, but it sure does make it way tougher. And so I added it to the all surfaces because it just makes it so much stronger. It doesn't add a lot of weight. Although I probably put, I don't know, maybe an ounce of tape on this, maybe a little bit less. I didn't actually measure, but this green duct tape was quite heavy. Um, but it was just for looks. This one I decided to do green, again from the dollar store. This tape roll is $1, so it looks cool. I think doesn't really do much for the strength. It didn't really need it, but it's cool. It makes it easier to see. The white up against the sky is pretty hard to see. This was a lot of fun to build though. Just kind of coming up with it in my head, just throwing it together just to see if I can make something else that flies. This is definitely a good one. So I did a little bit more tape on the top side just because um, there's some super tall grass and bushes that I have landed in before, and I figured if there's any dew on them or anything like that, I don't want the paper to get wet. So put one layer of packing tape across basically all of it, um, just to help protect it so it didn't get wet. And then here I glued down the wires for all of the servos, just so they're not flapping around in the wind. Looking back, I probably could have put tape over the wing before I put the servos on. I might have made it a little bit easier, but it's like a difference of 30 seconds to try to get the tape underneath the wire, so it's not that big a deal. Tape on the ailerons too, just to stiffen them up, just because. So definitely if you want to save weight, you could not tape it up for sure. You might save some weight. So here is Bronco 1 in the red and Bronco 2 in the green. So you can see the difference in the wing is gigantic. The fuselage is also a lot smaller. The wing's about the same. The rudder and ailerons are about the same. But the weight was, I think, over 1 ounce lighter. So it worked out pretty good. But that's the end of this one. I'll show you guys some flight videos soon. Thanks for watching.